Welcome to Nameless Debate Radio, where radioactivity is contagious. You can join us in broadening our minds on the Nameless Debates Discord via the link below and even feature here yourself, if you've got what it takes.
First,
Can everyone
how
hear me
long
properly?
well, hi,
Yes, we can
Raj.
hear you.
Okay.
Hi there, Raj.
So, David, do you wanna like facilitate, David? Do you wanna like introduce the topic and stuff?
Yeah, I'd
before
be
that,
curious to ask our participants like if they want to have it like a formalized thing or if they just want to go right into like open discussion.
first thing, I have a few questions. First thing, how long this debate takes? Like an hour?
An hour, I think.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, an hour, yeah.
Okay, an hour. And Raj, do you want a formulated debate or like a freestyle
Well, I
one?
have to introduce the topics and then like
Either one is
Uh,
fine. Like it doesn't really matter to me. It depends on how it goes. We'll see.
Well, I would like to have a formulated one, to be honest,
All right.
because that way I can keep myself from just rambling, because that's something I
there's a
tend to do.
structure to the debate. You have
All right,
opening,
that's true.
and
I mean,
you
that's
have a
good.
back
That's good.
and
Yeah.
forth, and then you have closing statements, right?
Okay. Can you
Yeah,
repeat
I
that,
was
Julius?
I was just saying to begin with, Julius, that if the participants don't want to use that structure, they don't really have to, you know.
Okay, that's fine then. I
Yeah.
was told that, but yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so first thing, Nameless, you're gonna introduce the subject, then you're gonna give us the structure, and then we're gonna start, correct?
Yeah, so how the structure is basically just an opening statement and a rebuttal and then open discussion.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. So
Wait,
the topic.
David, how much time do they have for each section? Come on.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
I have times if anybody wants.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
I think 5 minutes would be good. How do you feel about that?
Opening statements are 5 minutes, and then usually we go with 34 minutes back and forth. 3 minutes each for closing statements, and then 10-minute questions for the audience.
Okay. All right. Someone then keep the timer for us. I will try to keep my own time.
So the topic of the debate is scientific realism true? On the affirmative side, arguing that scientific realism is true, we have Raj, and we have 0041. So, and we have 5-minute opening statements, rebuttal, and then we go into open discussion. And then after we do open discussion, we move into I think it was closing statements and then questions.
Okay.
All right, so Raj, I guess, goes first since he's the affirmative.
Yeah.
And you have.
Okay. This is my exact claim formulated. Science. This is my claim. Science is a useful tool for making truthful descriptions and explanations of events within the natural world. That is statements which correspond to the circumstances of reality and which provide a rationale for them. That is, aid us in understanding the conditions and stipulations or rules which are the grounds of said phenomena, and consequently help us to predict them. That's what I think science is good at doing. So to be clear, I'm not claiming that science is perfect at this, or that all endeavor or all efforts through science are bound to be like correct. You know, I'm not saying necessarily correct. That's not my claim at all. I'm just saying that it's effective at doing this and has worked in doing this various times in the past, a lot of times, you know. So yeah, what is science? You know, I have to define what science is if I'm going to be making a claim about it. So what is science and how does it operate? Basically, science is the systematic pursuit of knowledge regarding the natural universe, which seeks to organize and explain its phenomena, structure, behavior, and the general laws which govern how it operates through careful observation, rigorous experimentation, and the development of hypotheses or theories. Critical to scientific endeavor is what we call scientific methodology. Part of scientific methodology is objective observation, whereby one gathers and measures information about some occurrence in reality perhaps even delineating said data through models or visual representations of some sort. And the next step would be the construction of a hypothetical explanation, which we usually call a hypothesis, which aims to explain the data which has been accumulated. Next is an absolutely fundamental aspect of scientific methodology, namely experimentation, which is built on the principle of falsifiability. Essentially, if essentially a hypothesis is considered scientific, if there is some procedure or method that could be used to determine if the hypothesis were true or not. And of course, this isn't some sort of absolute determination. I'm an epistemological nihilist, so I don't think we can know anything with absolute certainty. But I think that that science does a pretty good job of this, such that we can make these sort of determinations with some relative degree of certainty. And yeah, continuing on, basically, if our hypotheses were false, we should have some way to ascertain the falsity with some degree of certainty. So yeah, this is what experimentation is about, testing the validity of our hypotheses. And depending on the outcome of said experimentation, we either modify our hypotheses to accord or harmonize with the data that is a result of the experimentation, and then proceed with further testing and further alteration of our hypotheses as needed until it is consistent with what has been observed through testing. Or if the experimental data, which is preferably the result of numerous experimental acts, corresponds to our hypothesis, then we submit it for assessment and critical analysis by other scientists who will ideally carry out their own process of experimentation to likewise test the validity of the hypothesis. And by the way, this is why repetition of experiments, and more specifically the ability for experiments to be reproduced, is an important aspect of science. So there we go. That's a basic summary of what science is and why it works, basically. That's my opening statement.
Okay.
Do we have timekeeping?
Sorry?
Yes.
Okay. How much time would be remaining?
1 minute.
Okay.
All right. Well, I can say a few more things in that 1 minute if you want.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
All yours.
Is that? Oh, okay. Okay, sure. So yeah, according to some sources, like just to like get a better grasp of what science is. Here's what some sources say. I took it from Britannica and Scientific Direct, some articles on Scientific Direct. Yeah, basically here's what it says. The scientific method is a way of conducting research based on theory construction, the generation of testable hypotheses, their empirical testing, and the revision of theory if the hypothesis is rejected. And another source says, the process in the scientific method involves making conjectures or hypothetical explanations, deriving predictions from the hypotheses as logical consequences, and then carrying out experiments or empirical observations based on those predictions. And finally, in a typical application of the scientific method, a researcher develops a hypothesis, tests it through various means, and then modifies the hypothesis on the basis of the outcome of the tests and experiments. The modified hypothesis is then retested, further modified, and tested again until it becomes consistent with observed phenomena and testing outcomes.
Time's up.
All right. That was kind of perfect.
All right, user, you get a 5-minute rebuttal. And then we move on to opening statements.
My opening statement first. Don't I have the right to an opening statement?
Yes.
Well, you can make a statement. Yeah,
okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, let's start. For my opening statement, I want to present a hypothetical situation, a situation of which a plane pilot wakes up to find himself in the cockpit of a plane. The cockpit is locked, the window shield is blacked out, and all he have access to is the dashboard of his plane. The vision of the outside world is not required for pilots to fulfill their goal, which is to take off the plane and land them. Pilots have access to various to various sensors that showcase measurements on their dashboard. Then then they can take off, fly, land, and proceed to perform their function. But using those, since the pilot have no access to the outside world, his cockpit is locked. My argument lies that he cannot make statements about the outside world. His statements cannot be testable. He can't make them. Thus, he can't make them. You talked about the debate is about scientific realism. Yeah, and scientific realism is a philosophical position that holds that scientific theories provide an accurate representation of an objective reality that exists independently of the mind. But here's where the contradiction lies. How can, if perception is a function of the mind, how can the science, which is something that is dependent on the mind to be done, provide true statements about the mind independent? How the mind dependent can provide statements about the mind independent, and how and even and there is other issues like how we can trust our sensory data to be correct. In the movie The Matrix, the main character Neo exists within a simulation of the world. So and all his sensory data is spoofed. He thinks that he lives in New York City, I think, but he's not. He's floating within a bubble. And the scientific method, while he's inside the matrix, cannot help him produce statements about the mind-dependent world, about what's inside the matrix. Also, how can we prove that we possess the reasons required in order to understand, to interpret that data without relying on reason? Because reason is not self-evident. If you say something is self-evident, you are relying on a circular argument, which cannot be proven. And how much time do I have left?
You have 1 minute, 10 seconds.
So, okay, let me do a summary. So, in summary, we as a consciousness exist within the prison of the body. We have no access to the mind-independent world. We never had the perspective of existing within the mind-independent world. We only exist in our minds. So all what we see of the world, all what we sense of the world is mind-dependent. The scientific method is useful. It is utilitarian. In a utilitarian sense, it is correct because it provides a good tool in which we can build stuff and further our goals. But can it produce true statements about the mind independent words? That's something that the opposition still need to argue for.
Time is up. Thank you both for your opening statements. Now we have 34 minutes of back and forth. So Raj, I'll let you go first.
Well, all right. That was a lot, and yeah, you made like several points there. One of them was like how self-evident truths are circular, and another one was about how like that example you did of that pilot in the cockpit, how he couldn't make a statement that would be testable. Several things like that, and they're not really objections at all to my position because well, I don't really see what their relevance is, how they're salient. My claim was never that every statement we make would be testable, or that every statement we make would be able to be proven true or false by scientific methodology or application or whatever. That was not my claim. So I don't know what that has to do with it. And the other thing about self-evident truth being circular, I don't see how my argument relies on
May I
self-evident truth
answer?
not being circular.
May
Sure.
I elaborate? So the
Sure.
debate is about scientific realism. Can science?
Well, hold on 1 minute.
Let me finish the point, Rex. Oh, you speak. You speak.
Okay,
Fine,
sure.
fine. You take the mic.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It's not exactly about scientific realism. That's just the name that was provided for the sake of brevity, apparently, because they couldn't find any shorter thing. So I don't actually technically believe in scientific realism. Like, my exact claim is what I already stated, and I posted it in the Coliseum for already, so you can look back at it at any time. So just try it. I'm just asking you maybe to try to engage with my specific claim, and not what scientific realism is or what people say about scientific realism. Just try to engage with my specific claim.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
Thank you. If you want, I can restate my claim.
Restate it, please.
Okay, sure. Science is a useful, not absolute or perfect tool for making truthful descriptions and explanations of events within the natural world, i.e. statements which correspond to the circumstances of reality. These statements are not synonymous with the reality. These statements can be faulty, they can be flawed, they can be erroneous, and they will never be an exact what's the word? They'll never be exactly the same as the reality itself, right? We have to convey it through language, which is inherently flawed. But yeah, basically, they correspond to the circumstances of reality and which provide a rationale for them. That is, aid us in understanding the conditions and stipulations.
Here's where you lost me. What do you mean by correspond to the circumstances of reality? What does the word circumstances have to do with that?
Well, I'm using the word circumstance in the usual use of the term.
Let me ask the fundamental question here. Can science create true statements about the mind independent world?
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Okay. That's the debate here. If you said sure, yes, substantiate how?
Well, the mind independent world, that's reality that's outside of our mind. Well, we observe reality, right? This just goes back to when I explained what science is and scientific methodology. Science is built upon observation, observation of the natural world. We collect and gather data using our senses. We perceive the natural world and we use our senses, senses of sight and hearing and feeling and whatever, all our senses. We use that to gather information.
Yes, gather information. Perception. Perception, the gathering of information, is it the function of the mind or the function of the outside world?
Perception, perceiving things, that's a mind-related function.
Okay, so still, you see where the circular argument happened. We are using a mind-dependent thing in order to create statements about a mind-dependent thing.
No, we're not. We're using it to create statements about a mind-independent thing, about the natural world outside of our mind.
That we perceive.
Yes, but the natural world is not our perception. The natural world is other than our perception. We perceive the natural world, but it's not synonymous with our perception.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Okay, take my matrix example. In the example of the matrix, you have Neo living inside the matrix. He can conduct as much experiments he wants, but he can never produce a true statement about the mind-independent world because his perception is being fed false information.
Okay, could you repeat that one more time, please? Sorry, I didn't understand that completely.
Okay. In the example matrix, you have Neo, a human, who exists within an artificial womb with his perception being flooded with false information that does not correlate to anything in the real world, in the mind independent world, but with information that is fabricated by simulation. How do you think that the scientific method can help Neo, which exists within the matrix, to create statements that are true about the mind independent world that is outside of the matrix?
Well, I guess it wouldn't really be able to help him in that situation, no?
Okay, yes. Okay. Let me take that argument and see what I'm trying to convey with it. So perception is an internal function, so it is mind dependent. Perception is mind dependent. And when we talk about the world, we are talking about our perception of the world. When we do experiments on what we perceive to be the world, but not the world itself. Because
Right.
Neo inside the Matrix is doing experiments on his perception of the world, but he does not have access to the world. Even after he leaves the Matrix, he's still trapped within his mind.
Oh, okay. So are you sort of arguing that we might be in that sort of matrix type situation?
I'm not arguing that we might be in that Matrix type situation. I'm arguing even if we are not, we are still using a mind dependent function in order to study the world.
All right, sure, but I don't see why that would mean that we can't make accurate statements about the mind independent world just because our perception is mind dependent. I don't see how it follows that if we perceive things
because
using
you don't
our mind.
I'm sorry. You can speak talking. Sorry, I have a bit of lag. That's why I cut you off. Sorry. Can you repeat that statement from the beginning?
Okay, sure. I don't see how because the statements that we form, the propositions that we make depend on our perception of reality, on the information that we have gathered of reality through our perception. That therefore, whatever proposition we make cannot be an accurate reflection of reality. I just don't see how that follows from the other thing.
Okay. How? Let me elaborate why they follow from each other. Because they follow from each other because of the simple fact is that our perception of reality maybe there is no way. Hold up. Let me rephrase that. Because there is no way to falsify that statement. The statement that our perception of reality correlates with the real reality. There is no way to falsify it. Because in order to falsify it, you will use the mind-dependent function of perception. Okay. We don't have access. We don't have.
Yeah, that's what I'm disputing. I do think we have access to the world. Like I said. All right. Here's what I was saying before.
Hold up. Listen to my point to the end. We do not have access to a neutral third party who is mind independent, who can look at us and says, "Yes, you are doing good. Your perception is correct." We will always have to rely on our perception, which is a mind dependent function, in order to study the world. the mind-independent world. So in order to study the mind-independent world, we have to squeeze it through the hole of mind-dependentness. We cannot study mind-dependent thing. We cannot study something unless you put it in your mind.
Right, yeah, your point is basically that in order to perceive things about the world, we have to perceive things about the world with our mind, which I absolutely agree with. But I don't see how how it follows from this that whatever we perceive is necessarily going to be false. I just don't see how that works.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. And what I'm saying, they don't know that we perceive necessarily is true. You cannot make an argument for it being true or false, because in order to make that argument, you will have to rely on perception.
But wait a second. All right, so what? Let me see if I get this straight. What you're claiming is that we can never know if our perception of reality is accurate. That's what you're saying.
Yes, it's an untestable theory. It's an untestable claim. It's unfalsifiable.
Okay, well, I agree with that. That's not something to disagree with. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that.
So if you agree with that, you cannot assert that science, which relies on perception, necessarily provide true or false statements about the mind-independent world.
Yeah, I specifically said at the beginning of the debate that I was not saying that.
But that's not what you said. And hold up, maybe.
Yes, it is. I said it's not absolute or perfect. It doesn't always work 100% of the time. That's what I said.
Science is a useful tool for making truthful descriptions and explanations of event within the natural world.
It's useful.
But what
it's
I
not
demonstrated here, is that there is no way you can test whether or not the statements that we are making about the mind-independent world are true or false. What we can do is say that these statements are useful, but not that's outside of our ability.
Yeah, this just seems like some sort of epistemological nihilism sort of position. Like you're saying we can't ever know whether our perception is true or not, for sure. And I agree with that. We can't know anything with any certainty. With any absolute certainty. But I do think we can know things with a degree of certainty. Like I clarified that at the beginning of the debate, that I myself am an epistemological nihilist.
No, but you need to substantiate that. So you need to
substantiate. I absolutely agree.
You are the one who need to provide a proof that we can create somewhat correct, true statements about the mind-independent world. Because as I shown, you can't make statements about the mind-independent world unless you use perception. Even if our perception of the world is 100% correct, we still have to process that data through our reasoning, and still reason cannot prove reason. There is no tangible way for humans to prove to humans that we possess reason, that it is valid into processing data.
Okay, so you're making a bunch of claims now as well too, which means you have to substantiate them as well. Can you do that?
Yes, I'm making the claim that reason cannot prove reason because, and the substantiation for that, it's because that would be a circular argument. The same way it's the same way as saying a book is true because the book claims it's true. Even if we have access to correct data through the function of our perception, we cannot be sure that our reason, which we use to process that data, is valid, because in order to because we don't have access to another thing other than reason. As reason cannot prove reason. That's my point. Because that will be a circular argument.
Reason cannot prove reason. All right, can you define reason for me, please? What is reason?
Reason. Hold up. Reason is the process of analyzing data and inferring conclusion from such data.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we cannot prove that that we can do reason using reason, basically.
Yes.
So we cannot prove that our reason will always make accurate descriptions about reality.
We cannot prove that reason is a valid tool of analyzing, understanding, and formulating correct judgments about statements.
Okay, but why not? You're literally making an assertion right now, and you still haven't justified that assertion.
I'm making an assertion because in order to substantiate reason, what will you use? You can't use reason, so what other thing that we have?
Yeah, I don't understand your argument. Like, isn't your argument circular at some point as well too? Like how do you know that how do you know that we can't use reason to prove reason, basically? Or how do you know that our perception of reality is not enough, basically, to make true statements about it? Like, if our perception of reality is correct, if it is correct, then the statements we make about reality using our perception can also be correct. They're not necessarily correct, but they can also be correct. And that's basically what science is. It's trying to make true statements that aren't necessarily correct, but which can be correct or false. It can be either one. And we try to determine that through testing.
I agree with that. I agreed with that. I agree with that. Science
so
can
that's basically
be
my whole position.
Hold up. I agree that science can be a correct description of the mind-independent world. But I said,
I mean that science can lead. Science can lead to accurate descriptions.
Hold up.
Okay.
Can lead, whatever, can lead, yes. But there is no way we can test that. The same way that reason can be a correct way in order to analyze, understand, and formulate conclusions based on evidence and logical analysis, but we cannot guarantee that, because in order to guarantee reason, you need we don't have to hold up. Sorry. We cannot guarantee reason using reason, because that's circular in nature. So
yeah, okay, go on.
No, that's my point. You said you talk about it. Like, well, what do you think? How can we prove reason?
All right. I don't think we can prove reason. I don't think we can prove anything with absolute certainty, like I said. But
not with absolute
after hearing
certainty, hold up. I'm not saying absolute certainty. Just provide
You're not
believe that reason may be like zero. Not as in zero.
Okay. All right. I just want to get something out of, basically out there. It doesn't seem like you're disagreeing with my position at all. Like, nothing you said actually contradicts my position. Again, I never said that science always works at making accurate statements, accurate descriptions or explanations about reality. I said that it can, and that it has done so. That's my explanation, and that it's useful for doing so. It's not perfect for doing so, and there may be better tools for doing that.
What I said is that those descriptions about reality are untestable because we don't have access to the
No, they're not.
mind-independent reality. Independent reality.
They're, first of all, they're not untestable. I like I made in my opening statement that we literally do science by testing our hypotheses, the
Yes.
statements that we make. That's like an essential part of it.
Perception. We are testing perception against perception, which can only lead to create coherent statements, but not necessarily statements that correspond to the mind-independent world.
I agree. I agree. I completely agree with that. Nothing in my original claim said anything about that. It doesn't really look like you're disagreeing with my claim. Okay, let me just ask you a question. Do you think science is useful? Science is useful. That is, it is a good tool. It's not a perfect or absolute tool. It's a good tool for making full descriptions about reality, for making truthful descriptions about reality. Not for determining not for determining our descriptions of reality, not for determining the truth value of the propositions that we make using science with absolute certainty. But do you think that we can be certain to some relative degree of the propositions we make through scientific endeavor? Do you think we can be reasonably sure, not absolutely sure, but can we be reasonably sure? Because you can't make the argument that you can't ever be reasonably sure about anything, because you're making a claim right now and you have to be reasonably sure about your claim in order to be making it as well too. So if you think that it is possible to be reasonably sure about things, that is to be sure about them to some degree of certainty, then what about science exactly do you think that makes it so that we can't be reasonably sure about the things that the science is about, the claims or propositions that are born out of scientific endeavor?
Here's the thing. I agree with everything you said there, but
that's my claim.
There is one. Hold up. But there is one key word there that is very important. Reasonably so. And if reason is unfalsifiable, it renders the entire framework unfalsifiable.
Okay. Sure. But you are making a claim which you are reasonably sure of, aren't you?
Yes, I'm reasonably sure of.
Okay.
Yes,
how did you reach that reasonable amount of certainty? How did you do that? How are you reasonably sure that you are correct?
Because I exercised reason. Yes.
Yeah, but everything that what you're using to make this statement is your perception, is your experiences. Everything relies on basically everything that you think of and that you perceive is based on your mind. Every statement that you make, every thought that you think of, every inference that you make, everything is based on your mind. This statement right now that you're making is based on your mind. So how can you be reasonably sure of it? Your whole point is that we can't be reasonably sure about any of the statements that we make, because all of the statements that we make depend to some degree on our mind. So we can't be reasonably sure. But you're making a statement right now which depends on your perception, depends on your mind. So how can you be reasonably sure about it? I'm very confused. That's just contradictory.
Here's the thing. Here's what I said. I said that reason, science are tools that allow us to fulfill functions. They are utilitarian. They allow us to fulfill functions. They are
okay. They
not
may be that.
tools
I agree.
for us. Hold up. Listen to the end. They are not tools. They are not meant to create statements about the mind-independent world. The fact that they are useful tools is verifiable. If we exercise reason, we survive. If we exercise science, we live a better life. But saying that reason and science are useful tools in order to create statements about the mind-independent words is an unfalsifiable statement, thus rendering your position like standing or what, pretty much. Like, how do you falsify reason? You can't.
Okay, but you're making a statement right now based on your reason. You reached this conclusion using your reason, using your perception, using your mind. How can you be reasonably sure of it?
Yeah.
How can you be reasonably sure about it? You said
Sure
you
about what?
specifically claimed
Sure
that you were
about
reasonably sure
my
about it. If you're not
reasonably,
reasonably
yes.
sure about,
Using
if you're not reasonably sure
with-
about it, okay.
within
Here's
the
the bottom line.
framework,
Either you're
within
reasonably
the
sure about the claim
Wait,
that you're making.
2 seconds. Let Raj finish, user, and then go for it. I
Okay.
think lag here is causing over talking.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, here's the bottom line. Either
Yes,
you are
sorry, guys.
reasonably sure. Okay, it's all right. Okay, so here's the bottom line. Either you are reasonably sure about the claim that you are making, which it certainly seems like you are, and which you admitted to explicitly. Either you're reasonably sure about it, or you're not reasonably sure about it, right? If you are reasonably sure about it, then I have to ask you, how did you reach this reasonable? How did you reach this certainty? How did you reach it? Because you're claiming that that science isn't effective at producing propositions about reality, which we can be reasonably certain of. So in order for you to have reached this claim that you're making right now, you must have a better tool than science that works even better at making propositions about reality, which we can be reasonably sure of. Because you're being reasonably sure right now. So do you have something better than science to do that? Is the claim that you're making right now falsifiable? Is it or not? Like I'm very confused right here. These are contradictory. You're contradicting yourself.
The key word of what you said is reasonably sure. Reason is a framework, and it is axiomatic, which means we start from reason. There is nothing we have better than reason. Such framework cannot be. Hold up, let me finish my point. Such framework cannot be falsified. Cannot be falsified if we say reason is correct. But it can be falsified if we say reason is useful. Is reason useful? Yes. Is science useful? Yes. They help us serve functions. I am reasonably sure of these statements because I'm functioning within the framework of reason. But the framework of reason itself, no one can be sure of it because it's unfalsifiable. Is it utilitarian?
All right, I agree with that.
So I take the utilitarian point of view, saying that science have utility to us, reason have utility for us, but do they correspond? Can they help us form statements that correspond to the mind-independent world? That is an unfalsifiable claim. How can I falsify that? If it is unfalsifiable, it is not a claim I can take. Pretty much that's it. Until now,
that right there.
Hold up, Rash. Until now, you managed to produce a falsifiability test to reason that does not require reason. No one can produce a falsifiability test to reason without somehow using reason. Thus, we should take the utilitarian point of view, which is the side I'm arguing from, saying that reason is useful, science is useful, but they cannot help us create statements about the mind-independent world because science requires perception, and perception is a mind-dependent function, and reason is an axiomatic thing, thus it is unfalsifiable.
Okay, all right. So first of all, you're strawmanning my position. You're arguing against a strawman, but I'll get to that soon. What you said before. Hold on. I want to hint on something that you said before.
You spoke at length and you objected when he interrupted you. Do not do the same to him.
I just want to
just give him like a minute or two. Yeah, just give him the rest of the time.
Yeah, Raj gets at least 2 minutes.
Thank you. It's all good, user. Don't worry. Okay. So here's something that you explicitly said. You said that if a claim is not falsifiable, then you cannot be reasonably sure about it. Is the claim that you are making right now a falsifiable one? And if not, according to your own words, you cannot be reasonably sure about it. Is it falsifiable, the claim that you're making right now? Is it yes or no?
About what? What claim did I make? Can you tell me the claim? And I'll tell you if it is falsifiable.
Your claim is that reason cannot be false because is unfalsifiable. So we take it axiomatically. That's your claim right now. And that therefore somehow, I don't know how this follows either. I'm gonna have to focus on that soon as well too. But somehow this follows. Wait, hold on 1 minute. Hold on 1
keep
minute. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So your claim is that reason is unfalsifiable when we take it axiomatically, and that it follows from this that science is not useful at making accurate descriptions about reality, descriptions which correspond to the nature of reality. That's I don't know. Those two things do not follow from the other, but let's just assume for a minute that they do follow. That's your claim, right? Can you falsify that claim? And if not, you, according to your own words, cannot hold it. You cannot be reasonably sure about it. Those were your explicit words. So can you falsify that claim? Yes or no?
Hold up. If I think that it is potentially falsifiable, if you can point out, hold up, if you can point out something that is mind independent that says that reason is a valid tool to create statements about the mind independent. And even if I say, like, I'm not very confident in this argument, so, but even if I say no, it will still leave us at stalemate, where we cannot say that that reason is potentially a valid way to form statements about the mind-independent world, and it's neither it will neither affirm or I did not find the word. It will. It's neither for or against if we can't produce falsifiability test for and against. That's.
Will that be?
Yep, that's it for the back and forth.
We're now moving on to closing statements, right?
Yes.
And user will start first because of the format, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
So he gets 3 minutes, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the debate started with: is science is scientific realism true? And we went ahead and talked about how is science a valid way to to form statements about the mind-independent world, which we can assign truth value to. The reality is that the reason cannot prove reason, and since that the only tool and the best tool that we humans have access to is reason, we cannot prove it or disprove it using itself, because that will create a circular argument. And also perception. We don't have access to the mind independent world. We only have access to what we perceive to be the mind independent world. Thus we cannot form statements about the mind independent. And there is also the issue of, can we trust our senses? Are our senses trustworthy? They can be, or can they be spoofed? Can they be lied to or not? All these issues, I believe that the opposition did not manage to answer, and I pass the closing statement to Rush.
Okay, as you say in your ending statement, you don't think I have sufficiently answered them, and I agree. Mainly because I agree with all of them, and nothing about my original claim goes against or contradicts any of those claims that you have made. Absolutely nothing about it. You didn't actually argue against my actual claim. It seems like what you were doing is trying to argue against I don't know what you think would be. I don't even know. You didn't really address anything in my specific claim. I mean, you yourself agreed that science can lead to valid, to truthful statements, and that it's useful for doing this.
I agree that science can produce useful statements, not true statements about the mind-independent world.
What is a useful statement? What is a useful statement? If it's false, how is it useful?
No, you make your closing statement.
We're in closing statements.
Yeah, we're not in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Here's my closing statement. My closing statement is that basically that your position not only makes no sense because first of all, you are arguing against reason, or against whatever your claim is. Basically, you're arguing for a specific claim, and you're doing so using reason, right? You're doing so using reason, and that means you're axiomatically assuming the validity of reason, right? That's literally what you admitted to. So how can you be sure of this claim that you are making, which you are using your reason to make, if your position is that we cannot be sure of anything, of any statement that we make, because we make it using our reason? That I don't understand. That's just a contradictory position right there. So on one hand, you're making a statement, you're making a claim about the world, about reality, about the nature of how things work, some sort of claim, and you're using your reason to justify it. And on the other hand, you're saying that statements that we make about the world, we can never reasonably be sure of them, because they depend on our reason. So on the one hand, you're sure about a claim, you're reasonably sure about a claim that you're making, which depends on your reason. And on the other hand, you're saying we can't be sure about claims that we are that depend on our reason. Two contradictory positions right there. So if you want a way out of this, just say that you don't know, that you're not reasonably sure of your claim. You think it might be true, but there's really no way that you can tell with any degree of certainty, because you're literally arguing about being reasonably certain, that is certain with some degree, to some degree, about statements that we make, about propositions that we make, that depend on our faculties, on our rationality, on our reason, which are all man dependent. So I don't know how you get out of this predicament right here. I just don't see any way out of it. There's no way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you either admit. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Time's up. Thank you both for your closing statements. Now we'll be moving on to audience questions. So if people want to raise their hands up, we can let you on stage. We can also do text questions in chat. I can read them out. It's up to you. Well, since there aren't any current audience questions, I'm more than willing to let you both back and forth until a question comes up. Then it'll take priority. So it's up to y'all.
Oh, okay.
Well,
what do you think, user?
Well, first there is a question by InSync. I have a question for user. Why did he never directly attack science? And the reason I did not directly attack science, because it will be very unproductive to attack science, because science depend on other things, and I went for what science depend on. If that makes sense.
Perfect.
Anyway,
I also have a.
You ask your questions.
Okay, I have a question in chat from Nameless here for you, user, and he asks, "Ask user what makes his position reasonable. What justifies his reason?"
What make my position reasonable is that I admit that reason is axiomatic, thus it can't be proven. And if we can't prove reason, we can't prove that our statements about the mind-independent worlds are true or not. I'm simply admitting the fact that we are making a leap of faith from the get-go. That's a leap of faith that we need to take in order to do anything productive.
Okay, can I bulge in here for 1 second?
Yes.
Of course.
How are you using the word prove? Because here's how I'm using it. I'm not using it to mean absolutely prove, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, irrefutably. That's not what I'm using. I'm using it in a way that means reasonably sure, like sure to some degree of certainty. We can be sure about one claim more than another, but we can never be absolutely sure about it. Are you sure about your claim to some degree, are you relatively sure about it, reasonably sure about the claim that you're making? Yes or no? Are you reasonably sure about it? Not absolutely, but reasonably.
Here's what you need to understand, Raj. Here's what
No,
you are
just answer the question. You keep avoiding the question. You keep avoiding the question. Can you?
Excuse me, I'll fucking ready. We're in the audience questions. Make statements. You can make statements responding to the other person's argument, but we're not moving to a back and forth. You can, like,
Right.
whoever answers the
Yes.
question,
Sorry.
be like, this is how user answered the question, this is why I think user is wrong, and you can present that to the audience, but you cannot get it in a back and forth again. Okay, next question, Will.
At the moment, we don't have any other questions.
Are there any more questions that anyone would like to generate? Did Terrence have a question?
It looks like T asked some questions.
If we want, we could just drag him up and he can directly.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just put your hand up and I'll. What? We'll bring you up. You can ask the question directly.
He wants me to read them out. He has them written out up there.
Okay.
So
he can't speak at the moment.
Okay.
Fuck, I don't know what these questions mean.
I can read them out if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So first question: what do you guys think of gnosis and noma? I don't know if I said those words correctly. Please forgive me. And do you guys think conceptualization is the limit of our pattern recognition abilities?
I don't know what Noesis and Noma mean, but I do understand the second question, and I think conceptualization is the limit of our pattern recognition ability. Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. Because like before we make any statements about anything, before we articulate something, we have to conceptualize it in our head first. It seems like before we can like actually have a formal statement written down. So that seems to be like the first first step. Like whenever we're observing anything, we have to conceptualize it somehow. Wait, no, then that would mean that it isn't the limit. No, it isn't. Conceptualization isn't the limit. We can also make statements about the things that we observe using our pattern recognition abilities. We can articulate statements about them. Yeah, so no, conceptualization isn't the limit, but it's necessary. It's necessary.
Did you have a response, user?
Hold up. Well, what was the question? How does one measure something without a standard system of logic or reference? Reason.
The question was, what do you guys think of gnosis and noma? And do you guys think conceptualization is the limit of our pattern recognition abilities?
I don't know what noises and noma are. Conceptualization is the limit of our pattern recognition ability.
Yes.
I don't know. I don't have enough knowledge of what he's asking in order to answer. And InSync asked a question. Can I read it and answer it?
No, in a moment.
Okay, take your time.
Okay, which are we going to Insync's question or because I believe Loud was up here?
Yeah, I was gonna let Loud go first.
Okay, we'll let Loud and then we can address anything. Sorry, yeah. So Loud, you go.
User, I had a question for you in terms of like scientific realism and stuff. Do you think that do you think there's degree of truth, right, when it comes to whether or not a scientific theory, let's say, like Darwin's theory or something, right, describes the world, right? Like, it's not like do you think that if scientific theories at least don't objectively describe the world because of the fact that whatever we can't meet that standard, right? Don't you think that they kind of at least approximate somewhat?
Do I believe that? Yes, but do I know that? No. I personally believe that. But is it a provable thing? No. That's my answer to that.
I mean,
Okay, I have one question for you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Love.
Yeah, like I'm just wouldn't you consider yourself a scientific realist in that sense then?
No, I wouldn't, because I hold that my belief is built for utilitarian reason. I incline to believe it because that will help me create stuff, not because I know for a fact or I have evidence that show that that is true, that our models correspond to the external reality.
Okay. And then was the instincts question next?
I believe so. Then it was Zenith.
Instinct, did you have a question? What? I can hear you.
Instinct.
I is probably a motherfucker. Continue.
All right. Do I move on to another question? I apologize. I can't hear. I'm not too sure what's happening.
Instinct, are you gonna be long or what's the deal?
We have 1 minute left for
Okay,
audience
There
questions.
is a
we can
question
extend
by...
the questions a little bit. B,
Yeah.
did B want to ask a question?
Yes,
Who?
he asked the
Or Instinct's
question in the
trying to?
chat.
Yes, we know he.
I'll read out Zenith's question very quickly.
No, bro, you just cut off Instinct. Can no one hear Instinct but me?
I can't hear Insync at all.
For some reason, I'm the only one that can hear Instinct. Say just.
No, I can't hear
read
him
the
either.
question out if you want.
B is raising his hand, by the way.
All right, what about now?
Can you guys hear
Yes.
Instinct now?
I can hear Insync now. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I can
Must
hear
have
him
been a
now.
bug with the stage.
Probably.
Oh, that was
That's
weird.
actually a pretty common bug.
Yeah, what I was just going to ask User was just like, he talked a lot about like the basically solipsism thing, you know, the logical problems with you can't prove logic or whatever. But like, I feel like he needed to make there's the crucial link with the scientific realism, you know, like he talked a lot about sort of why you can't trust reason, but he did very little work connecting reason and logic to science.
Exactly.
No, well, I would hold, I would take that criticism, but I think that it is a given that science depends on reason for us to analyze the data that we collect about the outside world, and to test that data, we require reason to do that. I think that it is a given, maybe, but if it is not, I would own to that I should have maybe put a bit more time connecting reason to science.
Okay. B, would you like to state one of your questions? And then wrap up. Is it okay if we wrap up after B's questions?
That's perfect timing wise.
Let's go.
I guess, yeah, I'll go with the shorter question, the one I asked, the second one. So I'll just quote it again. And this is for both, so either or could answer it. Do you think it's a coincidence that our science give us productive conclusions? If yes, why? If not, why not?
Raj, do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I don't think it's a coincidence that science just happens to accurately predict the world. Often, obviously not all the time. That's never my claim. But I don't think it's a coincidence at all. I think that science helps us to predict things that happen in reality and build things off of that. You know, and actually like basically learn more about reality, because it's good at doing that. Like I really don't understand what user's position is at all, because it kind of seems like he's arguing that our perception is like so fundamentally detached from the mind external world that we can never ever be reasonably sure about anything that any statement that we make. But I don't know how you're supposed to prove that ever at all, because our perception is not only all we have, and he's obviously relying on it when he makes any statement at all. So that's obviously a contradiction already. But our perception is helping us to build things and predict things and just form conclusions about things in the natural world. Like that in itself is massive evidence that our perception, not perfectly, but does correspond to reality
you're drifting
quite
a bit
often.
out of the.
That's great evidence for that.
You haven't answered.
Okay.
Oh, are you talking to me?
I don't want to interject too much, but
yeah, you kind of drifted out of the scope of the question.
Sorry, I can't hear you, Julius.
Here's
my question. Let me elaborate on my question maybe before just. I'm just asking, science as it is right now, does it or does it not give us things, conclusions, or whatever that are productive to our everyday life? That's a yes or no. And then if you answer yes or if you answer no, why do you think that happens? What is the reason that science does give us productive things, or why is the reason that science does not give us productive things if you think that it doesn't? And the second part of the question is the most important part.
Okay, so to summarize, yes, I do think so, and I think that happens because science is a useful tool. It's a useful tool for doing that, and it's a useful tool for making accurate descriptions of our reality. That's why I think that. That's exactly what we see if science was a useful tool for doing that. That's exactly what we'd expect. That's exactly what we'd expect. Yeah. So that's why I think it is.
Okay. I'll give my answer. Hold up. Let me pull up the question so I can answer it correctly. Hold up. Where the fuck did it go? Okay. Do I think that it's a quote-unquote coincidence that our science gives us production conclusions? Do I think that it is that our science? No. I don't think that it is a coincidence that science gives us productive conclusions. Why do I think that it is not a coincidence? Because we have created science in such a way to give us models that predict our perception of reality. So if I take a ball and make it fall, according to our scientific models, I can calculate where the ball would be during its fall. Those two things are still perception, but that's outside of the scope of the question. Why is science like that? It is because organisms that are incapable of reasoning are dead. If a monkey see a lion go into a cave and then he is incapable of reasoning that a lion is in the cave, he will die. The same for humans. We just evolved our reasoning and we built upon it so much, and we call this thing science. So science was built for utilitarian reasons. That's why it is productive at giving us utilitarian models. I hope that answers your questions, Pete.
All right. Huge thank you for the audience questions. Huge thank you for both debaters. We're past the time at this point, so everything that's said till this point isn't judged anymore. The judges will be moving to another room just to deliberate and announce a winner. People can come on stage and talk. Y'all can keep debating as much as you want. Nothing is judged at this point. Thanks again, and we will announce the winner soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a very good debate, user. I enjoyed it.
I think that you won, to be honest. Like, I made a few blunders here and there, I think.
I made a few blunders here and there as well. Well, not really blunders insofar as you just stumped me a little bit, because I didn't really know what to respond with sometimes. But it seems like I eventually did figure out the
Like,
correct response.
what I still don't get about your point, and I'm sorry,
Absolutely, it's fine.
like I still like very much don't understand it, is that what you don't seem to be able accept about my point is that I attest, I say, hey, reason is unprovable, and you are telling me, how do you prove your statement that you are saying reason is unprovable? That's what I still like don't
Oh no,
understand.
no, no, no. And what Raj was getting at wasn't how do you. That was a rhetorical way of suggesting like that. So what? Basically, like okay,
Yeah.
reason's unprovable, but
Yeah.
science still works though. Like undeniably,
Yeah.
science is out here working. So
Yeah, exactly. And not
But
only
so
that, but
that's
so
what I mean.
what we can still.
So when you say like you know what he was asking you was if your critique is what you're offering, right? That logic cannot prove logic and therefore is not reliable. Why should I trust the critique? It was produced by logic, right?
It's
Perfect.
like you're engaging the same supposed vicious circularity that you're accusing the other person of. You're saying,
Exactly.
here's the thing.
you can't use A to prove B, and I'm like, okay, but you're using A to make that statement about
No,
B.
I think
It's like
I
No, but
understand
as you just
I
said himself
understand.
specifically, we axiomatically assume logic.
Yeah,
So we
okay,
shouldn't
but
have to
then
prove it because we axiomatically assume it, and he's doing
Well,
that
yes.
himself too.
okay, but then
He's
that's
explicitly
where
said that he is.
That's exactly the point. Yeah, is user agrees that we axiomatically assume it.
okay, if
And
we axiomatically
logic.
if we axiomatically assume it, that's not what the debate should have been about.
no,
Exactly.
it was. This is what I mean.
But then that Raj, that was
Dude,
your
yeah.
job to get it off this topic.
Yeah, I agree, Raj.
I tried. Didn't I?
No, you could have just
I did fail at doing
not
that.
addressed him directly. You could have been like, okay, he keeps saying this, and then just like instead of just like making arguments in rebuttal to him, you can actually make arguments past him and talk to the audience and be like, this is why I think it's true. He's not going to address these. He's just going to repeat himself. Like there's so many more things you
Yeah,
could
I
have
agree.
done.
I definitely
right?
I definitely failed at doing that, but I did try
Instead of
to
just
do that because
responding
I
to the
said at
same
several
like
points that
looping conversation.
I think a more pertinent focus for the criticism though is the fact that user, even though admitting that we axiomatically assume it, thought it was a pertinent criticism that was basically his whole argument, right? It was just like, well, you can't really know. But the thing is that if we all acknowledge that and move on, it still seems like most of us arrive at a position something like scientific realism, like science really works. It does seem to
Wait,
describe the
Brad, I do have to ask, are you
Yes,
actually an epistemic
can
nihilist?
I say something? My point is that science. I never said that science does not work. I said that we can never verify if
That's not
if
the thing. Yes,
That's
but
not what scientific realism is,
the thing.
though.
Yeah, we don't. Whether or not we can, whether or not we can verify it is beside the point. The question is, are we reasonably confident that it does actually describe the world? That's the question.
exactly. Yeah, your argument doesn't address my original claim at all. I never disagreed with it. Nothing, like I said several times at several points in the debate, nothing in my original claim and my explicitly and precisely made original claim disagrees with anything that you're saying. It doesn't disagree with it. So you're not arguing against it because it's not an objection. It's not a valid objection. So you're not technically arguing against my argument. Against my claim.
Hold
You're not doing that.
on. I'm still a bit lost here. I'm still discombobulated, as a wise man once said. Let me tell you the flow of the conversation from my perception of and like maybe you can enlighten me where I went wrong. So my plan was, if I can instill doubt in reason, I can instill doubt in scientific realism and 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 knock it down as a belief. It may be true, it may be false, but we can never know. Where is the problem in that reasoning, according to Julius and InSync and everyone here?
It's just not a very effective strategy. Like, first of all, it's counterintuitive. For not only because you're using reason, but because we're all using reason to evaluate it, but also because like the fact that we cannot know is something we can just accept from the beginning, and then it needn't trouble us when you bring it up. That's why.
Yes, and second thing is
That
for
makes
like
sense.
the billionth time, it
That,
doesn't contradict my actual claim. It doesn't contradict it.
what is your
I never
actual
said
claim?
two
Because
things. I never said. Okay, as I said several times, my claim was never that we can prove anything, like absolutely prove anything. What my claim was that we can be reasonably sure about certain propositions.
yes,
We can be reasonably sure about certain
Yeah,
propositions,
actually,
which you agree because you're reasonably sure about a proposition right now, and that science can help us to form propositions which we can be reasonably sure of through scientific methodology. That is my point.
yes.
can and has, which is actually very weak. Science not only can and
Exactly.
has, science reliably does.
Exactly. That's
Reliably,
literally my
reliably
only point.
does.
Here's
Exactly.
like
That's literally
I
my
don't
only
still
point, and you have not
see.
argued against it.
Raj,
Hold on.
drop
I don't
drop it.
understand
Okay,
you.
drop it. The debate's over. We're talking about it now. This is a debrief. Shut the fuck up about the
Okay,
fact
I'm
that he
sorry.
has.
I don't
I'm
see
sorry.
like he said really sure, and I agree to that. We are reasonably sure, but we are reasonably sure is contained within the
If anyone
framework of
wants to come
reason.
up,
No, that silly sook guy's not coming.
oh, is that Apollo?
Fuck. He's a troll. No, it's not Apollo. It's just a random.
I saw that they
Anyway,
were
which
pathological. Yeah, I wasn't gonna bring that. But if anybody else wants to come up, like put your hand up, we'll drag you.
Wait, can you drag?
what way to
Well,
point
not
out
really
is
drag.
that
It's the same thing.
Well, you should be able to drag. That would be
No.
intuitive.
My point is that we are still operating without read with the
The judges do have a
with
result,
that,
by
but
the
if
way.
of reason is false, and then if the framework of reason is unfalsifiable, then it leaves us with the inability to say that scientific realism is true or false. But
No,
it
it doesn't.
leaves us
No,
with
it
the
doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
That's
it just
completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't, and you should be directly
all
attacking the idea
why it
instead of
doesn't.
when you
Why-
try and run to solipsism or epistemology, dude, you're not
That's
trying to
why
undermine scientific realism. You're trying to undermine all knowledge and everything ever. It's a
Exactly.
waste of my
Basically.
time and a waste of everyone else's time.
Yeah, but I can explain, right?
Exactly.
Like, repeat again what you said, user. The last thing.
Hold up. What I
Also,
said is that
we do have the debate results if you guys care.
Yeah, just give me just
No,
like
hold
1
up.
minute. I'll just finish this.
Hold up. I want to get this to understand this. What I said is that he said reasonably sure, and I agreed that we are reasonably
Oh no,
sure.
wait, I
But
remember.
all
I remember. You said we can't. What it means is we can't say scientific realism is true because we can't know. Yeah, that's not true. We can say I do not know, but I'm pretty sure scientific realism is true.
That-
That's perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying about being sure about something with a relative degree of certainty, not with an absolute degree of certainty, but with a relative degree of certainty. That we can hold
So-
propositions,
Relative
such
to
that
what?
we can hold propositions and actually believe in them.
Relative to what? This is, if you are saying relative to reason, they are 100% agree. But if you are saying relative to truth, then I don't agree. If you are saying
I don't-
relative to reason,
the thing
then I
is,
agree.
whether or not we can know is separate to whether in fact they are true, and we don't need to know to think they're true, to say they're true, to believe that they are true. We don't need to know. That's the reality
Can
of
you
it. But
repeat that? Can you repeat that?
yeah, we don't need to know in order to think or believe or we don't need to know.
I agree with
we
that,
have,
Insync. I agree
okay,
with that.
no, but what I'm saying is, dude, what I'm saying is, it's possible to believe scientific realism is true and also understand that you cannot know, but still think that it is actually true. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you said. But here's what I said. I said Here's where my opinion diverged. I said for utilitarian reason, so we can do shit. Because if we don't
Oh my
assume this,
fucking
we
god!
don't do
Yeah,
shit.
you keep bringing this up, user. How? What does
Yeah.
it even mean? What does it mean to say science is useful? I'll tell you what it fucking means. What it means is science corresponds with reality. That's where you get utility from. How do you get a technology that
Not
works, user?
necessarily.
No,
Not
user. Shush,
necessarily.
shush, 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 user. How do you get a technology that works? What you do is you have a model of what's going on, and you make the model accurate enough that when you try to create something that takes advantage of your understanding of the mechanics of nature, that thing functions. Right? Like a computer or a fucking plane. Okay? If the model didn't correspond in some ways, in certain aspects, with the way things actually are, if it didn't, things wouldn't work. So what does it even make? What sense does it make to say, yeah, I mean, I kind of believe it. I just believe that it's just useful. Like, there's no such thing as just useful.
Here's the thing. I addressed that it is useful to the perceived reality, and it is
That's not meaningful.
coherent.
That's not
Hold
meaningful.
up. And it is coherent with the
That's
perceived
not
reality,
meaningful.
but we can
That's
never.
not meaningful. That's not meaningful. If I have in front of me a cardboard box and an airplane,
Yes.
okay, one
Yeah.
of them works in order to
Yeah.
help me to fly, and one of them doesn't, and it has nothing to do with what I perceive. If I were to hallucinate that the cardboard box, I get in it and I hallucinate that it flies, does that make it so? No.
Yes. No. I agree. But even if it does, you still perceive it as if it does. Like
That's
if you
irrelevant.
get
The
on a
point
plane
is,
and the plane
whether
flies.
or not
Hold up.
in
Hold up.
action.
Don't cut me off. Don't cut me off. Don't cut. I respected your time. I respect mine. If you get on a plane and it flies and it lands, you perceived that you got on a plane and you perceived that it flew and you perceived that you landed. So
You're being
our model.
retarded right now, dude. You're completely intentionally missing the point. What you perceive about whether or not it flies has nothing to do with whether or not the plane actually flies. That was the point about hallucination, right? And it was to demonstrate that what you're modeling cannot be your perception, because it's not on the basis of modeling your perception of the way air moves. The only way the plane actually can fly is that your model, which is obviously ultimately made of perceptual observations, is actually corresponding with the way things are in some respect. Otherwise, the plane wouldn't fly.
Here's my point to that. Do you have access to the mind independent world? And did you use in your access to this mind independent world and saw, yeah, well, the plane is
I
flying?
don't have to.
We don't have
Here's the
access to
thing.
that. So why are you
Here's the thing, man.
about it?
Dude, you seem to be repeatedly missing the point. I don't have to know. Here's the thing. The best explanation. No, shush. The best explanation of the working is correspondence. If you think you get to appeal to the utility without appealing to correspondence, you then have to furnish us with an alternative explanation of
Here's
what
the thing.
utility
I
consists
will give you an example. Yeah, there is more than 10 ways to implement a sorting algorithm. You know that, right?
You're really
Answer.
triggering me right now, dude.
Hold on.
You're not addressing the things I'm saying to you.
I will address it. Just give me time. Let's say you have a function in a software that you call to sort a list. You call the function, the list is sorted and returned to you. Then you go ahead and you go, okay, I'm gonna model how this function works. And you create a sorting algorithm, and then you come to me and say that this certain algorithm I produced is the same, is correspond to the same algorithm that is used in the software. I will say to you, how do you know that? Can you test that? You don't have
So
access to the source code. You don't have access to
the
the.
question is, where does the utility actually come from? How can you claim that it has utility?
Exactly.
Because it
Yeah.
works.
Do
Because
you
it's
make a
works.
distinction between real and perceived utility?
We understand. You can observe the utility, but the
Yeah.
burden is on you to give an account of what produces it. How come some solutions work and other ones don't? How come?
How come some solutions work and other don't? Some solutions work because they create useful fictions to explain
That is
how the
vacuous.
phenomena work.
That is identical with saying, the sleeping agent works through a sleeping faculty.
Oh, yeah.
You're not fucking saying anything.
What I said, we can create a useful fiction in which we can
Is
model
not meaningful. The question is, what is usefulness? You cannot appeal to usefulness in your fucking explanation.
Okay, I understand. I understand that point.
We have
Hold
the
up.
results we want
So,
to announce.
Hold up.
Can we
Let
get
me
that going just for the people that can't hang around for this event?
Yes.
Okay, throw it in results. Throw it
No,
in
user,
results.
you're not going to tell. I'm just going to fuck this. Please go, Cinder. Okay.
Okay, I'll go ahead and announce this. So, based on the deliberation from the results of the judge, we had a decision of 3-1 in favor of Raj. Just a short little summary of it is overall the argument did seem to go kind of off topic, but both contestants were also having a little bit of issue talking over each other. But generally speaking, Raj had a slight more effective points being made. In particular, I think one thing that kind of helped with our deliberated ending argument that was really getting stuck around the circular reasoning or the circular argumentation within reasoning. But generally, that is how we voted for this debate. Feel free to, if you want to, join another VC chat later, talk more about it. But that is this round. So thank you for participating.
I'm muted, user.
Good job, user. This was a good debate, and you definitely stood up pretty well.
Anyway, I need to crash because it's 2 a.m. But I'ma continue this point with you in sync another time. But for now I need to go to
But
crash.
if we're going to continue the conversation another time, user, like you need to have a think between now and then, and you need to come up with an alternative account of utility, because this is the burden. Like what I'm explaining is essentially the standard view of how come science works. Like
what you are saying, hold up. But before I go to sleep, so let me, in order for me to understand what you are saying, so maybe I'm misunderstanding what you are saying. You are saying that the fact that it has utility, that means that it must correspond on some level, abstract or actual, with what is going on behind the curtains of the universe.
It has to actually correspond. This can't be an abstract. Well, what would that even mean? Yeah, it has to actually correspond with some structural regularity, quote unquote, behind the curtains of the universe. Yes, that is the normal view, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you don't think, and if you think that that is not required in order to have utility, well, then it's not clear how come some models work when others don't. Because if it's, for instance, the perception thing, right? Like, how come I can't hallucinate the plane into the air if what matters is that the model maps to my perceptions, right?
Okay, I understand your point. I understand it. And what I meant by on an abstract level, it may not be 100% it, but it can be in some sense analogous to it.
Yeah, definitely not a perfect isomorphism, but there's some. there's some degree of structural correspondence. I don't see I don't see how else it could be.
Like for a sense, like we don't actually believe that there is mathematics being calculated behind the curtains of the universe, but there is something that is like analogous to it in a sense. That's what I'm saying.
Why isn't Einstein a prophet?
Because he had the material to know. If he hadn't the material,
What?
yeah, he had the material.
No, stop. You're saying because he could demonstrate it, he wasn't a prophet?
No, I didn't say that.
You said because he had the material. What's that supposed to mean?
That's supposed to.
The question we're here today to decide is whether psychology can rightly be described as a science, or if there might be a rather more apt term to describe what is actually occurring within psychological practice. I will be critiquing the view that psychology is science, but it is important to realize that I'm not thereby devaluing the contributions psychology makes to the human condition. Rather, I will simply be articulating significant methodological differences which warrant the distinction between doctoring the soul and science as such.
The conclusion that they come to.
Okay. So what conclusion does every person in the world come to that you know of?
Oh, that's a bit of a straw man, right? What I actually
That's
said
not a straw man. You're essentially saying that the example I laid out is not possible.
No,
so I'm
it's
asking
about as
you
bad
then.
as a straw man could get it, right? Listen to what
No,
I'm saying.
in fact, I'm saying you
Dude.
tried to disregard it by saying people don't think that way.
Oh
I'm saying
man,
that people do.
listen. People who think that way have a